Welcome back to the show. Well, the coexisting phase of the different payment rails like ISO20022 MXMT messaging, that coexisting phase with Swift, we got an end date, ladies and gentlemen. XRP go boom. Somebody wrote that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and digperspectives.com for exclusive content. Right now, $2.23 trillion market cap for crypto. The market is up 0.2%. 60,400 plus for Bitcoin, 2,600 for Ethereum, and Tether is at 117 billion plus market cap. USDC at number 6 spot, 34 billion plus market cap, and XRP at the number 7 spot, 59 cents, up 1.2 on the 24, up 5% on the 7-day. Range of price very quickly here now between 59 and 60 cents. We'll keep an eye on it. Let's get started. I want to start and level set right here because this really is the problem. And now we're printing about $1 trillion worth of debt and interest every, 100 days, I believe it is. So it's pretty despicable. But nevertheless, I want you to listen to this in level set. It's very short, but it's super great explanation of fractional reserve banking, which I believe is where the suppression and the fight from big banks to weaponize government agencies like the SEC and yes, the O, that the radio frequency for the mobile is there. There's no money. The money isn't there. That's the difference, right? You know, you could take the people away from going to bank all at once and the money's still not there. That's the scarier part of this, but they're right. And absolutely a great definition and analogy explaining all of that. So understanding that right now, currently, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, this guy's super smart. You must buy Bitcoin, he says, because America goes $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. And, you know, look, I think crypto speaks to this, and I'm not pushing Bitcoin the way he is here, but just crypto itself broadly, because the idea and understanding that we are in a fractional lending problem. Because remember, the last crisis we had in 08-09 was a real estate default swap crisis. Where we're at today is much different. Now, yes, there's going to be problems with real estate. There's going to be problems with the traditional stock market. That's why so many CEOs 4 to 6 months ago started selling huge positions in their companies they love so much. But what I'm saying is that this is clear evidence to me, and I don't know if it is to anyone listening, but it's clear evidence to me that the fractional reserve lending banking system, along with this debt-based system that we have broadly, is broken and busted. It is exacerbated. It is vulnerable to collapse. And certainly the payment rails that are used are antiquated and vulnerable to attack. And we've even seen that. But we're moving to a multipolar asset-backed system. And I think that's why everybody's encouraged, like Robert Kiyosaki is saying, to buy something like Bitcoin and or physical gold, right? Because these assets are going to have value the way cash can't carry it. So, because that's where the real problem is going to happen this time. So speaking of cash, let's talk about Tether. I had a great conversation with Mikkel here on a Week in Review show, and listen to our conversation here about Tether.
On the Tether front, I think this is such a funny conversation because we've actually seen this countless times with almost every single technology. You see the Napsters come around, you see the LimeWires, you see kind of the Silk Roads and all these different kind of original products that want to keep their ethos. And it doesn't mean those aren't valuable in some sense to the world. Like a lot of people got tremendous value from all those different applications. And while there were nefarious things done with those, like people were using the Silk Road for legitimate use cases, especially people in countries where they didn't have access to other forms of e-commerce. So in that same exact way, I think that's how Tether's going to live out the rest of its life. I think for the most part, in the large financial jurisdictions, Tether is essentially just going to be outlawed, or not necessarily outlawed, but given a qualification that makes it less investable or less holdable by large institutions. So it could be something as simple as FDIC insurance applying to things like USDC and RLUSD because they comply with ongoing regulations, and not something like Tether. instantaneously with something like that, no large financial institution in any jurisdiction is going to touch Tether if it doesn't have that quasi-government backing or guarantee behind it. Now, will Tether still be used all over the world for people in different jurisdictions who want to use that specific asset because they don't want the risk of it being clawed back or don't want to interact with the US government? Absolutely. Like, it's still going to be all over the world. But when you're talking about the use case behind retail using this thing for kind of dark web payments or just using it to get access to dollars in jurisdictions where there's no banking, I think that's a lot smaller than large financial institutions putting dollar-denominated units like USDC and RLUSD on their balance sheet and using it for institutional DeFi. So I think when ultimately we do see these regulations come in place, they are going to push Tether out or at least give it a less desirable designation. And companies like Ripple and Circle, who have obviously been doing everything they can to work within these different guidelines put out by the government, I think those products are going to be poised to benefit most. And I think there's hundreds of historical examples of this happening across different industries. The early players who don't adapt to the regulations, they kind of get pushed to the...
There you have it right there. They're going to get pushed. Well, let's keep the conversation going here. Could XRP become the next crypto king? I believe so. On-chain expert Smoke Dog, you know who he is. We cover him here all the time. He's warning of a looming Tether bubble that might burst, sending Bitcoin and Ethereum into a tailspin. XRP, with its stability and Ripple's compliant real USD, could rise to dominance. And I think that well, listen, I mean, we have talked about this here on the channel, exactly this idea. It was a continuation, actually, of when I sat down with Mikkel, right? You know, this is something I've talked about a lot. We're seeing, Tether get pushed out of the EU market. Will it get pushed out when legislation's done here in the US? Probably so. That's what I'm thinking. And if that happens, it makes way for the really highly regulatory compliant tokens that really have been chosen from the beginning. The USDC, the real USD when it's launched, and Paxos, right? Those kind of products. So interestingly enough, there's some play here, but I want to touch on what was said here by Smoke Dog originally, that they could throw the market into a tailspin and send Bitcoin and Ethereum into that tailspin because of a burst of Tether's bubble. And this is why I believe one of the things that signals that this could be happening and that could take place, and I've said this multiple times, is the introduction of the spot ETF for Bitcoin and Ethereum. That was like the big signal that told me, and I expressed it at the time on the channel, that was the big signal that told me they're probably going to crush Tether because they wanted to provide a new avenue of liquidity flow to Bitcoin and Ethereum before they suffocate Tether. Think of it for a moment. If I was a government and I wanted to eliminate these 20+ thousand cryptos in the market, which we do not need 20,000 use cases for, nonetheless, if I wanted to really smash that market, the best way to do that is to suffocate Tether. And if I take Tether out or suffocate it by pushing it out of the largest economies, its liquidity and market cap over time will shrivel up and shrink. And people will see it as a less viable solution over the highly regulated, trusted products that are available, like the soon-to-come real USD. That's just how I'm seeing it. We'll see what happens here. And this here is the write-out of exactly that from Smoke Dog here. Give him a follow. It's a great write-out, and I just explained and walked it through for you. So here we go. CoinDesk here, changing gears. Crypto legislation could still move through the U.S. Senate this year, but the window for doing so is narrowing, says Senator Cynthia Lummis and Tim Scott said Wednesday at the SALT conference in Wyoming. Now, with that being said, Senator Lummis and Senator Tim Scott took the stage at the conference, and Wyoming discussing how legislation could hypothetically move through the Senate and making a plea to voters in this fall's election. And it is a critical time for all of us to see that take place. Now, this is why I come back to the idea of them putting legislation for crypto through the Senate. Because now it is being discussed that the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve are considering reclassifying cryptos as currency. I know you've heard me talk about this, but please, I'm begging you to stay with me here. because this may happen. We want to try to figure out as much information about it happening as possible. Remember after we got the summary judgment, I believe it was either a summary judgment or remedies phase, and I'm pretty sure it was the summary judgment. Someone asked Brad Garlinghouse on stage at a conference, why are banks not using XRP if you've won the summary judgment essentially, and XRP is not a security? And he said, well, it's the OCC. The OCC's telling banks they can't use it still. If the Senate puts out a bill that would reclassify cryptos as currency, I don't think that lines up directly with the FIT 21 bill. So whatever they do is going to have to go back to the House. Then it's all got to be signed by a president, whoever that will be at the time. So, but my point is if they go to this Bank Secrecy Act and make it a currency, then you're going to need to be under the Bank Secrecy Act in order to deal with these said currencies, these new currencies, in fact. And what would that mean for the exchanges if they're not bank secrecy compliant, right? Oh, but here's one that will be. It's State Street. It's the largest custodian in the United States of America with 44.3 trillion assets under its watch. And they just announced, with the help of Chainlink and Taurus Crypto Custody, that they are going to be offering tokenized custody for their clients. But they can't do that unless the OCC says they can. And if they can do that because the OCC says they can, that'll be because they decided to make cryptos a currency under the Bank Secrecy Act, and that would give permission to State Street to custody crypto because they're the largest custodian in the United States of America. Are you seeing where this is going? They're going to give this market to the banks if they do this. That's the plan. Remember, the OCC conducts regular examinations of national banks, federal savings associations, federal branches, and agencies for foreign banks. That's what we're talking about here. It doesn't say anything about crypto exchanges, right? Oh, okay. I'm just curious. So they would just be speculative market platforms. Is that right? So if that's the case, boy, we got a lot to learn yet. One thing I do know is they had it right all the way back to 2013 when Ripple's CTO was Stephen Thomas at the time, and he talked about XRP was the real digital gold for banks, not Bitcoin. Banks said we will have gold that can teleport into any vault in the world instantly. We all know the drill. As of 2013, the marketing brochure at the time, XRP was like gold in your hands and is designed to be the most liquid asset on the XRP ledger, and it will be even more liquid with the introduction of the real USD, I believe. Teleporting gold, so why should banks care? Because Ripple plans to use XRP to solve their liquidity problems. In the world of Basel III, it counts as yet another balance sheet asset against a bank has to hold cash to cover its liabilities. Ripple's big idea is to use XRP once its market cap gets high enough and being traded heavily enough to provide banks with liquidity on demand. Now, very quickly, I want to go back to something here, if we could. State Street's going to offer custody, right? But they can't do it unless it falls under the what? Bank Secrecy Act, a currency designation? Maybe they can, but I know that they absolutely can if that happens. And what do we know from 2015 in the FinCEN decision? XRP is a virtual currency. So maybe it's just such that some of these things become currencies and some of them remain speculative assets. This is getting interesting. And so is this. Coexisting phase will come to an end for ISO20022. Remember, Swift told us for a period of time the current rails would run in parallel with the new standard, which is ISO 20022, which is a little confusing because ISO 20022 as a payment rail has been around for more than a decade. But this is the one that they all chose to standardize and to go with and make better, right? So if you look down here, what's interesting is that the MT messaging and all the other messaging that you see, all of that's going to be lined up to switch over to the ISO 20022. And they are saying that that phase is going to end and be ended by November 2025 deadline to end the coexistence period of the older MT formats. Now, this is massive because it shows to me that ISO20022 is proving out. That's what it's showing to me. Not to mention the fact that I want to show you the use of code sets and identifiers. This is what will allow them to introduce new currency codes that they're currently not dealing with in the banking industry. You know, like if the government decides to reclassify crypto as currency, you're going to need a whole bunch of new currency codes to work with ISO20022 messaging. And then you can start to mix not only sharing that rich data messaging and all that collection of data there in that payment rail and message, but you can also begin to integrate those new currency codes with the older FX currency codes. And hello world, we have a new revolution in the financial industry. As you know, I think that could take us to a road of 5 digits XRP as well, and so does Chad Steingraber. But we're going to have to wait and see because I believe legislation will be the true catalyst for the market and not just XRP. That's going to do it for me. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. I'll catch all of you on the next one.